11 things black mothers did in the 80s that would be illegal today. Black mothers in the 1980s raised children with a kind of authority that would get them arrested today. They disciplined with hands, belts, and switches. They left kids home alone while they worked double shifts. They sent children to the store at night, let them ride in cars without seat belts, and handled conflict in ways that would have Child Protective Services knocking on the door before sunrise. But these weren't bad mothers. They were survivors. They were women raising children in a world that didn't protect black kids, in neighborhoods where softness could get you hurt, and in circumstances where working 3 jobs meant your 10-year-old had to learn independence fast. The methods were harsh by today's standards. Some crossed lines that should never be crossed. But understanding context doesn't mean excusing everything. It means recognizing that black mothers in the 80s were navigating impossible circumstances with limited resources and doing what they thought would keep their children alive. These 11 things black mothers did in the 1980s would be considered neglect, abuse, or outright illegal today. But back then, they were called parenting. 1. Leaving kids home alone for hours. In the 1980s, black mothers working multiple jobs had no choice. They left children home alone, sometimes for entire shifts, sometimes overnight. If they worked third shift at the hospital or factory, a 10-year-old became the parent. They heated up leftovers on the stove, made sure younger siblings did homework, and kept the door locked until Mama came home bone-tired at 2 a.m. The rules were clear. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't answer the phone unless it rings twice, stops, then rings again. That's Mama checking in. Don't turn on too many lights so people think adults are home. And if something happens, call Grandma or Miss Johnson next door. Kids learned responsibility fast. They became little adults, juggling chores, homework, and babysitting, while Mama worked to keep the lights on. There was no after-school program, no childcare they could afford, no safety net. Today, this is neglect. CPS would remove children from the home. Parents would face criminal charges, but in the 80s, it was survival. Millions of latchkey kids raised themselves because their mothers had no other choice. And those kids grew up knowing how to cook, clean, and handle emergencies, because they had to. 2. Sending kids to the store at night. Black mothers in the 80s sent their children to the corner store after dark with a crumpled $5 bill and a handwritten list. Get a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and bring back my change. Don't stop to talk to nobody. 7-year-olds walked 3 blocks in the dark, past men drinking on corners, past alleys where deals went down, past dangers their mothers knew existed but couldn't avoid because groceries didn't buy themselves. Kids learned to walk fast, keep their eyes down, and hold that money tight. They learned which streets to take, which people to nod at, and which corners to avoid. They learned survival. Today, parents get arrested for letting kids walk to the park alone in broad daylight. Sending a child to the store at night would result in immediate police intervention and possible removal from the home. But in the 80s, it was Tuesday. It was normal. It was how things worked when you needed milk for tomorrow's breakfast and couldn't leave the other kids alone to go get it yourself. Was it dangerous? Absolutely. Did bad things sometimes happen? Yes, but millions of black kids made that walk and came home safe because the community was watching and because they had no other choice. 3. Disciplining with belts, switches, and extension cords. Black mothers in the 1980s disciplined with their hands and whatever was nearby. Belts hung on doorknobs as silent warnings. Switches were cut from trees in the backyard. Extension cords left welts that lasted days. Go pick your switch, Mama would say, and you knew what was coming. Pick one too small, she'd get a bigger one. Pick one too big, she'd use it anyway. There was no winning, only learning. The whoppings were public sometimes, right there in the grocery store, if you acted up in the living room with siblings watching as a warning on the porch where neighbors could hear you cry and know you'd been corrected. Mothers believed this was love. This was keeping you alive. This was teaching you that the world wouldn't tolerate your mistakes, so you better learn now while the consequences came from someone who loved you. They'd say, "I'm not one of your little friends. I brought you into this world. I'll take you out," and they meant it. Or at least you believed they did. Today, this is assault, physical abuse, criminal behavior that would result in arrest, prosecution, and children placed in foster care. Teachers are mandated reporters who'd call authorities the moment they saw marks. But in the 80s, this was discipline. This was parenting. This was what grandmothers had done, what great-grandmothers had done, passed down through generations who survived by teaching children that pain was a teacher and fear was protection. Was it right? That's a different question. But it was legal, accepted, and widely practiced in black households where mothers believed harsh discipline was the only way to keep children from ending up dead or in prison. 4. Letting kids ride in cars without seatbelts. Black mothers in the 80s packed kids into cars without seatbelts. 5 children squeezed into a back seat, meant for 3. Toddlers sat on laps in the front. Older kids stood between seats, heads brushing the ceiling, hands on the dashboard for balance. Station wagons and Cadillacs had bench seats where kids lay down during long drives, rolling around during turns, bouncing during stops, treating the car like a moving living room. Mothers drove with one hand on the wheel, the other reaching back to smack whoever was acting up, never taking their eyes off the road for more than a second. Nobody wore seatbelts because nobody had to. They weren't mandatory. Cars didn't have airbags or child safety locks or backup cameras. They barely had functioning brake lights. Today, driving with an unrestrained child would result in traffic stops, fines, and potential charges of child endangerment. Car seats are required until kids are practically teenagers, and the law is enforced ruthlessly. But in the 80s, you just piled in and went. Road trips meant kids bouncing around the back, sticking their heads out windows, climbing over seats, and somehow everyone arrived alive. Was it safe? Hell no. Did accidents happen? Yes, and they were worse without restraints, but this was before safety culture, before laws caught up to science, before anyone thought twice about letting 5 kids share 2 seatbelts. 5. Handling school fights themselves. When a black child came home crying about a bully in the 1980s, mothers didn't call the school. They didn't arrange mediation or demand intervention. They taught their child to fight. If somebody hits you, you hit them back. I don't care if they're bigger. You make them wish they never touched you. Some mothers walked their kids back to the bully's house and made them fight right there while both mothers watched. Y'all want to fight? Fight, but it ends today. Others sent their kids back to school with explicit instructions. Don't come home crying again unless you swung first. I don't raise punks. This wasn't about violence for violence's sake. This was about survival. In neighborhoods where showing weakness got you targeted, where teachers wouldn't protect you and cops wouldn't care, fighting back was self-preservation. Today, parents who encourage their children to fight face charges. Schools have zero-tolerance policies. Teaching a child to physically defend themselves is considered promoting violence, but in the 80s, black mothers knew their kids wouldn't get protected by authorities. They knew showing weakness meant becoming a permanent target, so they taught strength, even if it meant their child got suspended. Better suspended than victimized. Better feared than beaten daily. That was the calculation, and for many black kids, it kept them safe. Sickling. A smoking around children indoors. Black mothers in the 1980s smoked cigarettes in the house, in the car with windows up, at the dinner table while kids ate, in the living room while kids did homework inches away. Ashtrays sat on every surface. Smoke filled every room. Kids breathed it in from birth, developing asthma and respiratory issues that would last lifetimes, but nobody talked about secondhand smoke because nobody knew or nobody cared enough to change. Car rides meant sitting in the back while mama smoked in the front, occasionally cracking the window, filling the small space with thick clouds that made kids cough and rub their eyes. Some mothers smoked while pregnant. Some smoked while breastfeeding. Some smoked while holding babies on their hips, ash dangling precariously close to tiny faces. Today, smoking around children is considered abuse in some jurisdictions. It can be used as evidence in custody battles. Doctors report it. Social services investigate it. But in the 80s, it was normal. Everyone's mother smoked. Everyone's house smelled like cigarettes. Nobody questioned it because tobacco companies still ran ads saying it was fine. Doctors still smoked in hospitals, and the Surgeon General's warning was just words on a box nobody read. The damage was real. The asthma, the cancers, the early deaths, all real. But the awareness didn't exist yet, and mothers who smoked weren't trying to hurt their kids. They just didn't know, or couldn't quit, or refused to believe it mattered. 7. Giving kids alcohol for medicinal purposes. Black mothers in the 1980s rubbed whiskey on teething babies' gums. They mixed honey, lemon, and bourbon for coughs. They gave teenagers a sip of beer to calm their nerves or help them sleep. "This'll put you right to sleep," Mama would say, handing over a toddy that was more whiskey than honey, watching you drink it, confident it would cure whatever ailed you. When kids couldn't sleep, some mothers gave them Benadryl. When they had coughs, they got alcohol-laced remedies. When they were too hyper, they got something to slow them down. Whatever worked, whether it was approved or not. This was folk medicine passed down through generations who couldn't afford doctors, who didn't trust hospitals, who relied on home remedies that had worked for their grandmothers. Today, giving alcohol to minors is illegal. Doing it repeatedly is abuse. Using alcohol to sedate children would result in immediate removal and criminal charges. But in the 80s, it was medicine. It was tradition. It was what you did when the pharmacy was too expensive and the doctor's office was too far, and your baby wouldn't stop crying at 2 a.m. Did it work? Sometimes. Was it dangerous? Absolutely. Did some kids develop problems because of it? Probably. But mothers weren't trying to harm their children. They were trying to help with the tools they had. 8. Leaving kids in the car while running errands. Black mothers in the 1980s left children in locked cars while they ran into stores. "I'll be right back. Don't unlock this door for nobody. Don't touch nothing. Just sit there." 5-year-olds sat in hot cars in summer parking lots, windows cracked an inch, waiting for Mama to finish grocery shopping. 10-year-olds watched younger siblings while Mama went into the bank, the post office, the welfare office, wherever she needed to go without dragging 4 kids inside. Kids were told to duck down if anyone walked by, to stay quiet, to wait, and they did, because those were the rules and breaking them meant consequences. Today, leaving a child in a car even for 5 minutes, even with the windows down, can result in arrest. People break windows to rescue children. Parents face felony charges. Videos go viral. But in the 80s, it was normal, convenient, expected. Nobody thought twice about it because cars didn't heat up that fast, or so they thought, and kids were taught to sit still and wait. Did kids sometimes unlock doors and wander off? Yes. Did cars sometimes get stolen with kids inside? Yes. Did children suffer in hot cars? Yes. But it was seen as a risk worth taking, because dragging kids into every errand was exhausting, time-consuming, and sometimes impossible. 9. Sending kids outside all day with no check-ins. Black mothers in the 80s pushed kids outside after breakfast and expected them home when streetlights came on. No cell phones, no check-ins, no way to reach them unless they came home or a neighbor brought news. Go outside and play. Don't come back until dinner. That was it. No GPS tracking, no emergency contact, no way to know where your child was for 8 hours straight. Kids roamed freely to the park, to friends' houses across town, to the corner store, to the creek. They made their own adventures, got into their own trouble, and figured their own way out. Mothers trusted the community. They knew Miss Johnson would call if she saw your kid acting up. They knew the corner store owner would send them home if it got late. They knew older kids would watch younger ones. Today, parents get investigated for letting kids walk to school alone. Neighbors call police if they see unsupervised children. Free-range parenting is criminalized in many places, but in the 80s, unsupervised outdoor play was childhood. It was normal. It was healthy. Even. Kids learned independence, problem-solving, and social skills without parents hovering. Was it risky? Yes. Did bad things happen sometimes? Yes. But millions of kids survived those unsupervised days and became functioning adults who still remember those summers as the freest times of their lives. 10. Letting other adults discipline their kids. Black mothers in the 1980s gave neighbors permission to discipline their children. "If you see my child acting up, you whoop them. Don't even tell me, just handle it." Miss Johnson down the hall could smack your child upside the head for cursing. The church usher could pinch them for talking during service. The corner store owner could ban them for stealing candy. It wasn't just permission, it was expected. The community raised children together, and discipline was communal. Any adult could correct any child, and that child's mother would back the adult up. "What'd you do to make them put hands on you?" was the first question when kids came home complaining. Not did they hurt you, but what did you do? Today, any adult touching someone else's child without permission faces assault charges. Even teachers can barely discipline students without lawsuits. Letting neighbors physically discipline your kids would be considered negligence. But in the 80s, this was the village raising the child. This was community standards enforced by everyone who had a stake in those kids growing up right. Did it sometimes go too far? Yes. Were some adults too harsh? Absolutely. But the system worked for many families who couldn't watch their kids 24/7 and relied on community to keep children in line. 11. Working multiple jobs and basically being absent. Black mothers in the 1980s worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. They left before kids woke up and came home after kids were asleep. They worked 16-hour days, double shifts, overnight shifts, whatever it took to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. Kids went days without seeing their mothers except in passing. Mama's working became the explanation for everything. Why she missed the school play, why she wasn't home for dinner, why another relative was doing pickup from school. These weren't absent mothers by choice. They were present by sacrifice, breaking their bodies, working jobs that broke spirits, so their children could eat, have clothes, and maybe, just maybe, have a better life. But the absence was real. The emotional distance it created was real. Kids raised by exhausted mothers who had nothing left to give at the end of a shift grew up feeling neglected, even if they understood why. Today, chronic absence due to work could be considered neglect if children aren't properly supervised. If basic needs aren't met because parents are never home, authorities intervene. But in the 80s, this was poverty. This was single motherhood. This was what happened when there was no childcare, no paid leave, no support system, and bills that didn't care if you were tired. Those mothers weren't choosing work over children. They were working for children, even if it meant sacrificing presence for survival. It wasn't ideal, it wasn't healthy, but it was reality. Conclusion: these 11 things Black mothers did in the 1980s weren't signs of bad parenting. They were signs of impossible circumstances. They were survival strategies developed by women who had to be harder than the world their children faced. Did some of these practices cause harm? Yes, absolutely. Corporal punishment can traumatize. Secondhand smoke causes disease. Unsupervised children sometimes got hurt. Absent mothers created emotional wounds that lasted decades. But these mothers weren't monsters. They were survivors doing what they thought would keep their children alive, safe, and prepared for a world that wouldn't protect them. The difference between the 80s and now isn't just laws and awareness, it's resources. Today's mothers have more information about child development, more support systems, though still not enough, and more legal protections, though they're not equally applied. Black mothers today still face impossible choices, still work multiple jobs, still navigate systems that don't protect their children, still make hard decisions between safety and survival. But now those decisions are criminalized. Now poverty is treated like neglect. Now mothers doing their best with nothing get punished instead of supported. These 11 things would be illegal today. Some of them should be. Children deserve protection, safety, and care. But criminalizing mothers who are trying to survive doesn't protect children. It just punishes poverty and removes kids from mothers who love them but lack resources. Black mothers in the 80s did what they had to do, not what they wanted to do, what they had to do. And millions of kids survived because their mothers were strong enough to make impossible choices. That's not a defense of everything on this list. It's recognition that judgment without context is easy, but survival never is. Those mothers raised a generation that's still standing, still fighting, still surviving, just like they taught us to.